Is
Mhm.
there any one message you would like to close with to people that are suicidally prone or feeling hopeless or alone?
Yeah,
Anything that you could say to them at any
yeah,
age, whether they're a vet or not?
yeah, absolutely. I would have to say that the battlefield doesn't end when the war does, right? For many, the firefights continue. They continue in living rooms, in classrooms, in the space between breaths, right? Like ayahuasca taught me that healing, healing wasn't about, healing scars. That's just a band-aid, right? Ayahuasca taught me that healing is about taking that pain and transforming it into purpose. Today, I'm the founder of the Aya Mission. I have a fantastic career, a flourishing family. And with that, I would tell all those that are listening that in order to succeed, we have to accept and embrace that pain and transform it into purpose, and then plant seeds of love, compassion, right? And belief in yourself so you can then heal the generations that come after you. That's what I would say.
All right. Welcome to the show today, Ulysses. Hey, I'm really pleased and appreciative that you chose to take the time out to come on the podcast today. What you have to talk about, what your mission in life right now is all about, is really empowering and helping people to help and save themselves, and I really admire that. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Pete. I really appreciate you having me here. We hung out not too long ago, and I think we're going to talk about that during this conversation. But it's like-minded people gravitate towards each other. The main reason after getting to know you that I wanted to be on your podcast is because we walk alongside one another on the same path of healing, and it's really cool to be here and kind of share the story of the IA mission and myself, and as well hear more about you and where you came from, and kind of just see what are the next steps for the overall community and mental health well-being. So thank you for having me, Pete.
Heck yeah. Well, let's start at the beginning. Can you tell the guests kind of your life story synopsis, man? Like what got you to where you're at now, some of the difficulties you encountered, how
Yeah.
you were able to become whole and well and start this mission.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep a brief version, as many folks may have already heard my story, but in short, I'm a Mexican-born United States citizen. Our family migrated when I was very young, and in fact, I was an illegal immigrant until 15 years old. And I remember growing up, the struggles that came with it, kind of being a person that existed but did not exist type thing. It was always difficult to get healthcare. And then my weekends, I was always standing outside the immigration line, because although I was a illegal immigrant at the time, paperwork was in process to get my residency. And so a lot of my childhood is experiencing what that was like. And so I finally got my legal residency at 15, and then I joined the military when I was 19. Part of my upbringing was, well, our parents do the best that they have with what they were taught and the tools that they were given, right? And now that I reflect back, my mother did a fantastic job, and my father made some decisions that led him to be incarcerated for the majority of my childhood. In fact, he got out when I was 15, and shortly after, actually 14 rather, but shortly after, we kind of went our separate ways, and it was not because of him; it was more because of me. And so that was really difficult. So growing up, there was a lot of decisions that were pretty terrible, and I think I consider myself lucky to be here today, from gang-related activities, just things that are going to put me in a situation where I really didn't have at that time a future to prosper from, right? And so I joined the military when I was 19. The interesting thing is that in basic training, it was the first time somebody told me directly, looking into my eyes, that I had value and I had potential. And I remember one of my drill sergeants, Drill Sergeant Horde, he pulled us to the side, me and a couple of other guys that came from very much poor communities rather, and kind of put us to the side, and he looked at us and then he looked at me and he said, "You guys have tremendous potential, Ulysses or Lopez. you're gonna go far. You just gotta believe in yourself. And it was the first time in my life that somebody looked at me and I felt it. And for me, that was inspiring.
Wow.
So graduate, yeah, it was awesome, man.
What year
From
did you
there,
go in?
yeah, absolutely. I went into the military in 2006, right?
Okay.
So I had dropped out of high school as a sophomore about 2003.
Mhm.
I dropped out. I only wrestled. I only went to school to wrestle after wrestling season. I dropped out freshman year, went to school to wrestle, stopped going to school. They let me go in as a sophomore, dropped out again. And then from then on, I tried to go to school again as a junior. Again, same thing. I just wrestled and then I dropped out. And it's just school wasn't for me. So I eventually got my GED. And then, soon after getting into the military. So that's 2006. Yeah.
Can we address that real quick before we go on with your
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I I know people very well who never finish high school and are incredibly wealthy, owning their own business and all these things. It's
Yeah.
almost like we're trained from birth to realize, hey, you need to conform, you need to sit in this chair 8 hours a
Right.
day, you need to do what we say and accept everything as the truth. And then a lot of people it rubs up against who they really are, and
$100%.
it doesn't align with them. And so
Right.
I just want to point out the fact that not finishing high school, I mean, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
for some people, it's the key to unlocking true success in their lives. We're all not
Yeah.
meant to fit in a box.
Absolutely. Did you have a similar experience growing up, Pete?
No, I graduated and did a couple years of college, and it never was for me. So I
Right,
really
right.
understand. I felt that when you said it, I was like, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, there's this saying that's always in the back of my mind. If you judge a fish by the way it can climb a tree, it would always think it's dumb. Right. And
Amen.
that's absolutely true. I agree with you. I've met many successful individuals that dropped out of high school, got a GED, and then later went to college and their masters. I know folks with PhDs that have similar background. And it almost seems as though there's something within us, something in the spirit that says, like, this isn't natural and this isn't right. Trying to fit a round peg in a square hole
Mhm.
or a square peg in a in a round hole, but you get the gist.
Yeah.
And so I find that was true for me, right? It's not that school was not important. It's absolutely important. I think the opportunity for education is great. It's an
Yeah.
opportunity for us to learn. And the way the system is structured here in the United States, sadly, is that both parents are forced to work to at least keep the family afloat, and so they are basically relinquishing the responsibility to educate their children to a school system that has a generalized approach to education that we know doesn't work. We have systemic defunding of education systems across the country, and Arizona being one of the worst states for funding in education in the country. And so, like, it's difficult because it's absolutely there. There's many children that grow up and say, hey, you're not going to be anything if you don't go to school. You're not going to
Mhm.
be anything if you don't pay attention to your teacher. And what we're teaching them is to be subservient, to pretty much just kind of just be submissive to authority, regardless of what it is. And this kind of defeats the critical thinking aspect of the human experience, right? And so, yeah, yeah, 100% agree with you. It just seems that the key to people flourishing is two things, in my opinion. It's first of all, has to be challenging, right? And then two, it has to be purposeful. It has to be meaningful to you, right? That's the whole thing, is being part of something meaningful. Anyone and everyone can flourish. So
And I
yeah,
love that. And I don't know if I probably did misperceive the programming my parents were installing within me during my childhood and teenage years, but the belief that I accepted was without that diploma, without a college education, you're kind of worthless. You're nothing. You're not as good as you know what I mean? And it
yeah,
took over 40 years for me to realize, like, hey, I am something already, and
yeah,
I don't have to have a piece of paper to tell me of my worth, to validate me in any way. So that was a
yeah,
huge shift for sure. Let's get
yeah,
back to
yeah,
your
absolutely.
Army
Yeah.
experience at the age of 19. Let's
Hmm.
go through some of the experiences you had, where you went, what you did, and what you learned
Okay.
over those years.
Yeah, absolutely. And then please feel free to cut in at any time, Pete, and just kind of ask questions. Yeah, absolutely. So again, went into the military in 2006, went to basic training. It was a very much an eye-opening experience for me. Met a bunch of great people, but more importantly, like I mentioned, I felt like I was part of a brotherhood now and part of something meaningful, something bigger than myself, something that's given me purpose, right? And soon after I went to I actually when I graduated, they asked for volunteers and I graduated at the top of my class, basic, so it's not a big whoop, but awarded. I was like, hey, you can go to I think it's RASP, the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program.
Mhm.
But to go through RASP, you have to go through airborne school. So I'm like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go, right? I was motivated, dedicated, ready to kill, as they say. And so I went to airborne school, graduated airborne school, and then I went to the briefing for RASP, and the first thing they said is if you're not a U.S. citizen, right, you can't apply for a clearance, meaning you might as well just leave, right? They had a list of those people, and I was right on the list. I was a legal resident, but I wasn't a citizen, so I wasn't, I wasn't allowed to participate. Soon after, I was cut orders to the 82nd Airborne Division, and then, I fell in love with that brotherhood. I arrived in the 80 Deuce, and so I went to school, yeah, in like the late summer of 2006. And it was a absolutely mind-blowing experience, right? Everybody was a hard charger. In fact, when I first got there, I got to a unit in at the time they've been disbanded and merged with 3rd Brigade Combat Team, but I landed. I was assigned to the 4th Brigade Combat Team, and I was with 2508, 2 Fury, the Parachute Infantry Regiment. And then soon after that, right before deployment, I was transferred over to 1 Fury, 1st Battalion, 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment. And when I got to that brotherhood, it was interesting because I felt like I had NCOs that would chew my ass, but not because like they were just dickheads, but chew my ass because they knew I could do better. And so that experience was absolutely fantastic. We deployed soon after. It was my first deployment. Landing in Afghanistan was freaking mind-blowing. Just seeing a place that's so beautiful, but at the same time so brutal, was freaking astonishing. And then not just that, but I remember at times we would drive through Kandahar, and that I would see like the way the streets looked and the smells, the burning, the fire, people, the fires and all that stuff, right? It really reminded me of Mexico. And I've seen like a lot of my people, right? So I have a lot of family in Nogales, which is a border town,
Mhm.
and it's a lot better now, but a decade or so ago, it was probably a little longer than that. It's pretty rough. And so Afghanistan reminded me of parts of Mexico that the Mexican government doesn't really invest in. And so, that was eye-opening. And I didn't get to uh participate with the people, the local populace there, because I was just a private, right? That's NCO stuff, right? And an NCO is a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant, right? And so, but I did a lot of training. We went on a couple of missions. We in April 4th of 2007, we had a combat operation in Sangin Helmand province. That's RC South in Afghanistan, and it was a surreal experience because you're landing you're lined up with your unit on the at the air station, ready to board the Chinooks, the helicopters that carry troops, right? And this wasn't a battalion effort. So we had 1,500 plus soldiers about to infill in RC South and to support the British Marines and also the United States Marine Corps. And so we land and it's like landing at we land like at 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and just land in some poppy field. And I didn't see it's dark. We just have nods, so all you see is green, but it's just like for miles poppy seeds, and then you have like villages that are kind of randomly spread within the fields. And we're going from one field to another field, or excuse me, one village to another village. And but when the sun was coming up, just the beauty of the poppy field, it was just like something, it was just waves like green and crimson, a green and crimson river or sea rather, just spread right across the landscape. It was beautiful.
Wow.
So I remember I volunteered. Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. Have you ever been to Afghanistan or the Middle East before?
I have not.
Yeah, do yourself a favor, even if on YouTube, just kind of see the Afghani landscape, and just it's one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to. And I've been to several. Well, in that mission, that's the mission that I got shot in. When I volunteered to be the first person on guard, I was on guard, and then there for an hour I went and I got relieved. And as soon as I laid down, we started taking in direct. Soon after, the entire battalion was in contact. I got equipped, I got ready to go, and we started navigating through the village that we were pulling security from. And I just remember hearing the snaps and the cracks over our heads, and then the explosions of the RPGs that were flying. And again, this was a battalion effort, so you had like 1,500 plus soldiers randomly miles spread apart in some cases, all in contact, right? And being attacked and us returning fire, of course. One of the things that I remember too was this actually was like kind of really added to my PTSD, but feeling the dirt fall down my IFAC, not my IFAC, but my black vest. As we were skirting and rounds were hitting the mud walls, some mud walls maybe 15 feet tall, right? That dirt falling in the back. And so we ended up bounding, and my team leader says, "Hey, Lopez, gains fire superiority," right? What you do usually when you get a fire team online, you have your saw gunner, which me, that was me at the time, and that's a light machine gun. Usually you have the saw gunner come up and then really just gain fire superiority by force of, by through violence, right? You get up and brrr, and then just kind of getting up there and well, seeing the enemy kind of skirting like we've surprised them, had to do my job. And, we soon after the entire fire team and the squad was online. And for me, I felt like I was up there for, 5 minutes, but we were scooting back on. We were supporting our, I think, Bravo company. We flanked for Bravo company. And, it just, boom, I took a gunshot wound to the chest. I was returning fire in this spot where there's a cluster of trees where there was a known machine gunner's nest, and I got hit from somewhere else. Don't know what it was. The round ended up being a PKM round, armor piercing round. So they tumble after certain distance, is what I've been told, and it ended up hitting my buttstock, and then it ended up going into it right over my collarbone, down my chest, and blew out the bottom lobe of my ribs. And I still have that bullet in my excuse me, the bottom lobe of my lung, and I still have that bullet in my rib. So I was in the prone position, right? I was on my belly, returning fire, and then that's how the round hit me.
You're lucky to be
Yeah, it
alive. That's
was,
insane.
yeah, 100%, 100%. In fact, I got pushed off the berm, the hill. And when I woke up, I had my two of my buddies and squad mates, Sergeant Johan Ruano and then Specialist Joshua Hancock. And side note, Joshua Hancock's gonna visit me next weekend. I haven't seen him in 17 years, man.
Wow,
But
cool.
yeah, those are the guys that saved my life, man. I just remember getting up and they were just slapping me and they were like, "Lopez, don't fall asleep. Stay awake, buddy. Stay awake. Don't fall asleep." And they were controlling the bleeding. I could still, as I was coming to, I could still hear the chaos all around me, right? We're still returning fire, right? We still have explosions going off. And I eventually get carried out to the medevac zone, and by the time I get there, we have the battalion surgeon waiting, and he finally hits me with morphine, and I start going out. The next thing I know, I was on a Chinook getting flown out, and I just remember looking to the side and just seeing other soldiers that were wounded inside the Chinook being taken. And this was the dust off. I think it was dust off. I forget, but it was actually the British the British military that were providing that medevac support. And so they take me to, I think it's Bastoon is the place, because Landstuhl's in Germany. I think Bastoon is the place, but they had a field hospital set up, opened up my eyes, and at that point I couldn't see anything, and I was just going through the tent. I had the nurses and everybody with the, you know, a heavily thick British accent, saying, "Mate, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be all right." But I could still hear all the chaos. Like, "Hey, we need this ready. We need that ready." I couldn't feel anything then, but I could feel my body shaking as they were ripping off my clothes. And the last thing I remember before I went out is that they put mask on over my face, potentially oxygen. And then I hear he's not going out. And of course I wasn't going out. They hit me with a bunch of meds, but I was like in shock. And then they're like, we gotta do it. And I just remember like the force of cutting my chest open. And then I went out, man. And that was a freaking hectic experience.
Do you
So
think that you went out because of the pain or because of the medication that they were pumping into you?
I think the medication, I think that my will, like I think the medication finally kicked in and my will was like, you know what, just surrender.
Yeah.
And so I just went out, man. Yeah, it was an intense experience.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the recovery like? Where did you recover? How long did it take? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So a couple of things, the outcome of that gunshot wound, I had two blood transfusions. I had to be resuscitated twice. I still have permanent brain damage that I have overcome, thank goodness. And then we'll get to that. So I was in a coma for 2 weeks. When I woke up in Walter Reed Army Medical Center, right? It was really interesting because it's as though, and I still remember vividly, and I've had this experience recently again, but I was walking on a beach, I was walking next to a father figure, and I could just hear voices and I can hear relatives' voices, my family that were here, like my mom, and I could hear at the time my father-in-law, and I was just walking and they lead me and again, this is more than likely a hallucination because I was in a coma. They lead me into this bed and they say, "Hey, it's your time to stay here. You're not ready." Something to that. Like it was like I had this primal instinct or primal feeling of not wanting to leave the place where I was at, but I had to. And it was interesting because that was like a seamless transition to me waking up in the coma because I laid down in the bed and then I started like seeing people come into the same room that I just walked in. And as time passed, it turned into a hospital, right? Like I was in the hospital and my family was there and I'll have to share some images my sister took at the time. Um, you know, my family was there and uh, when I woke up because of the morphine, right, they had to wean me off of it and I had withdrawals. So I was in that coma for 2 weeks, and then after that I didn't sleep for 7 days. I just couldn't.
yeah.
It's just every time I closed my eyes, I couldn't quiet the gunfire. I couldn't quiet the voices and the images of the violence. I couldn't quiet that. And then every time I opened my eyes after a couple of days, I started having tremendous hallucinations to the point that I was convinced that I was somewhere in Afghanistan underground, even though my family was there. Like I could say, but I had that someone's lying to me, and I need to get back to my unit.
So wait,
Looking outside the. Mhm.
through this experience, you're saying your family was there. Were they physically there or
Yeah, 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 yeah.
oh,
So,
so
so yeah.
okay. Where
So
were
what
you that they
military
were able to
does?
see you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what happens is that if you're about to die, right, and it's like you don't have a chance of making it, the military does a great job of getting your family and flying them. In fact, I was supposed to die. They flew my family to Germany first, and they had me there. But by the time they got there, because it's such a long flight, I had stabilized. And so then the military, the United States government, then moved my sister, my mom, and my sister, and at the time my wife. Then they flew them to Washington D.C. to Walter Reed because I was being transported there. And
Wow.
so then the family started flying from Arizona to visit me. So they were physically there. I
Okay.
knew they were there, right? But I could not be convinced that I was in the United States to the point that when I was looking outside the window, I was seeing Black Hawks land and troops, run in and then being lifted away, which it wasn't happening. And I, even at a time I stole a fork, right? Because I had to defend myself and it really scared the doctors. Another time I put my robe, you know how they give you your garb that you put on you're supposed to have the open in the back. I had it worn the other way, wearing nothing underneath, and then just walking up and down the hallway like at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, it was like crazy.
Uh,
Like it was nuts, man. But
I've seen that.
so yeah, soon after, and in that time, I woke up with a country accent because of the brain damage, right? I lost the ability to read and recognize letters and characters, and even like recognize words, right? Both in Spanish and English. I'm bilingual, and then I had a very thick country accent. It was, and I kept saying the guy from Alabama. Yeah, so you have this area of the brain. I think it's called the Broca's region of the brain. I think that's here, and that regulates language, speech, reading, all that reading comprehension and so on and so forth. And so there's that part of my brain was damaged because of the blood loss, right? And
Oh,
yeah, it was interesting. I woke up with that country accent. Well, Joshua Hancock, he has a country Alabama accent, and so I kind of like woke up. That was like imprinted on me more than likely from the shock. And so a little funny little side note, because of that, Leonard Skinner, they sang me, they were touring Walter Reed, in that time of in the global war of terror. There were celebrities, musicians, they were kind of tour and visit soldiers. So Leonard Skinner was there, and they found out the story about the soldier from Alabama that saved my life. And so they sang me Sweet Home Alabama inside my room. One of the coolest
we
experiences ever,
just saw
man.
them about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So, and they
Oh,
sang
wow.
that. So that's cool, man. That's
Yeah,
wild. I
yeah,
didn't know they did stuff
yeah.
like that, honestly.
Yeah. It
And
was
all this
wonderful,
time you
man.
had that Alabama twang and everything, huh?
All day, yeah,
I've heard
absolutely.
that that is actually common, especially in brain injury, where people will wake up knowing another language they've never spoken. I mean, like all
Uh,
kinds of fascinating stuff. The brain,
yeah.
man, is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into consciousness later in this conversation, but absolutely, it is incredible. It's almost as though our brain is the receiver of information, and
Hmm.
our true personality and identity is actually part of this infinite, universal consciousness that we and everything that we consider that has life is part of. But
Can we stop
that
there for a
recover.
sec?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Greg Braden, he says now science is surmising that neurons are soft antenna, and to your point that identity is downloaded into us when we wake up into our physical life every morning or whatever, and that identity comes through the antenna also in the cell, according to Bruce Lipton, so that each of the billions of people on the planet usually can only download their personal chosen identity in physical form. And then for the brain to actually attract and pull in anything we focus on and think about through these soft antenna we call neurons. That's such a fascinating concept. I'm
Yeah.
excited to get to consciousness for sure. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. You know what? Let's pivot there. 100%. I think this is a great transition, and then we can come back to my story in the military, but I
yeah,
think
yeah.
this is important because, understanding, or at least there was a saying that was introduced to me not too long ago after founding the I mission. But many people, when we walk through life, we consider ourselves to be human, and in this life we seek spiritual experiences. But I'm finding the truth is that we're actually spiritual beings having a human experience, right? And understanding that is absolutely important in my opinion because it leads to controlling the mind and then your emotions. Right. In today's day and age, Pete, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. We see a lot of people. Well, Cat Williams, love the guy, funny comedian, but he said something that for me was very profound. He said that the world's greatest natural resource is attention and human attention. And it seems that those in power have found that out, and just people in general that are trying to profit. And so there's 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 so much stimulation around us to always distract our attention.
Mhm.
And this is a very important idea because when we start looking at, practices of introspection, meditation, breath work, all that stuff, it's all focused on being present and in the now. And for many people that don't practice meditation and introspection and journaling and stuff like that, they just, it's comments like, it's so hard to focus and, I just can't concentrate. What am I going to write about? I have so much thoughts in my head. Well, that's the product. That's the outcome of the system and the environment that we're growing up in, that we're constantly distracted and never given the opportunity to look internally. And so I find that interesting. And for me, I do I do I do exercises to make sure that I stay present. And, I journal, I meditate. We'll get to that. I practice breath work. In fact, you and I, right before we started, we did some breath work exercises recommended by Dr. Huberman. I believe that's what you mentioned,
Mhm.
but that's what we do. So I'm interested with you, Pete, like, what got you to a point and where you realize that, hey, being present and being aware and understanding the mind, right? That's the true essence of reality versus being distracted.
You know, I went through a time period from 1999 to 2014 where I believed the doctors. I believed that they had my best interest at heart, and they stuck me on mood stabilizers, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. I was on lithium for almost that whole 15 years, unable to really
Wow.
feel anything at all. And I really was clouded in my thinking and judgment, and was just running on the automatic subconscious programming from childhood, and this crazy reality continued to unfold for that 15 years. And once I got off of that in 2014, I started all over again. Third marriage had just ended. A single father, three kids for years, just jumping from relationship to distract me from the inner pain and suffering that I was going through. And the thing that really sparked it is one day I was listening. It was a few months after I got off those meds in 2014, and I was listening to Jim Rohn, who is the mentor of Tony Robbins. And he said, if you want your life to change and get better, you need to change and get better. And that woke me up. And it was
Yeah.
kind of magical, man. And I
Yeah.
started down this personal development journey. I stopped dating, and I started to do my own work, on my inner world, and I started exercising, and I lost a bunch of weight because I watched this documentary that was suggested to me by this guy called Fed Up, all about sugars. And just went cold turkey off all sugars for 2 weeks withdrawals, man. I thought I was gonna die for real. But after that 2 weeks, man, it was crazy. I went from like 250 pounds down to 190 within 6 months. My inner world was changed, and I started listening to podcasts and reading books. And the most useful podcast when it came to presence, the moment of now, consciousness research was eventually found maybe 5 years ago on a podcast through the Be Here Now network. It was recordings of Ram Dass uh, and all these different episodes. And I went from episode one and I did them in order. And then now I'm like on episode 294, right? And some of
Mm.
those I would listen on repeat throughout the day. The episodes were just so enlightening. And I felt so good hearing the words that he was speaking that I was like, there's something to this.
Absolutely.
And that's what started my personal journey for real. And then it eventually got interested in plant medicine because of Ram Dass, and things
Yeah.
like that. And it's just been like maybe 5 years where it's been so much fun connecting with people like you and recording these episodes to get it out into the world, man. Because what you have to say, your story will impact and influence people that I never could. So
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah.
I think you have a very compelling story, and you'd be surprised of the impact that you've already made. I think we're going to talk about our brotherhood that we've created recently later in the show. But kind of going back to your point, I 100% agree with you. I think like many people, they create these New Year's resolutions and they feel that, if I change this and I'm gonna change that, I'm gonna be a better person. And for some of that is true, absolutely, right? If you're not appreciate, it's your environment is gonna dictate, your success. That is true to an extent. Absolutely. I mean, 50 Cent said this quote recently that really hit me. It was funny. He was talking about a water bottle, right? A water bottle at the dollar store is $1. A water bottle at it's maybe $2 or $3, and then a water bottle at the airport is $7, right? If where you're at currently, you're not being valued, then go put yourself in an environment where you are valued, where you feel that that you have meaning and purpose and people appreciate you. So going to that environment, a new environment is absolutely pivotal in changing.
Hmm.
But however, that's we don't go far enough. The first thing that you have to change, in my opinion, is you got to change the mind. You got to change the way you see life and the way you see yourself. You have to realize that there is an internal, infinite universe within your mind, and that through that we can tap into consciousness. And a lot of that too for me was studying Hermetic philosophy, and I'm just a novice student. It was introduced to me about 2 years ago, and I study Hermetic philosophy. During my workout, I'll put an audio book on, or several books that I have here, like the Kybalion. But understanding that in order for us to truly change our personality, right? We have to change our personal reality. And that's
Hmm.
something that Dr. Joe Dispenza says. I'm a huge fan of his works. You were just
Yeah.
mentioning, podcasts that were pivotal in your transformation. In the past year and a half, too, reading Becoming Supernatural, as well as You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza, listening to his episodes online. He also has a show on Gaia TV that's important, talks about the power of the mind and consciousness and how we can leverage that to become the people that we were meant to be. So it's really interesting. And I think what I find too is that because we are so distracted, the general population is so distracted, we don't get to deal with the problems that have to be dealt with internally. And so we just have trauma upon trauma, issue upon issue that continues to compound on top of one another and keeps building because we don't ever get an opportunity to really sit with it and process that. And I think that's where plant medicine is absolutely pivotal, is that me and you both know, we recognize that plant medicine isn't the end all be all. It's not the magic pill, right?
Hmm.
You could get the same outcomes of psychedelic assisted therapy and psychedelic assisted coaching. You can get those outcomes by creating opportunity of introspection through meditation, through
Hmm.
breath work, through exercise, through reading, through journaling. I mean, reading, every time you read a book, you're developing a personal relationship with that author. Like there's so much knowledge and information that you can gain from people. But I mean, the average American can't afford a $400 emergency. We just talked about you need both parents working to keep a house afloat here in the United States. So when will they have the time to like quiet their minds and really look inside and see who they are supposed to be? Right. And what plant medicine does, it creates a cheat code, right? It creates a shortcut. It
Hmm.
says, well, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and do it now. And you just are kind of forced to do it. So,
Touching
yeah.
upon something you said, Tony Robbins, I love this idea. He said by reading a book, you compress decades of information, knowledge, wisdom, and experience into hours.
Ah,
That's
yeah,
magical, man.
absolutely.
So
That
you
is
have to,
magical.
and to read a book is to meditate with the author. I like that one too. Robin Sharma said that,
That's
and I was like, dang, that's good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to say recently that the list can change depending on the time, but if you were to say your three top books that you will recommend to people to get to at least get to start the path of healing, what would it be? What would they be?
Sure, sure. Psycho-cybernetics.
Maxwell Marx.
Yep,
Yep.
all about
Good one.
identity. A plastic surgeon that eventually became a spiritual guide for people about their inner
Absolutely.
world because he noticed that like he would perform plastic surgery and they had the same identity. They were embodying that same inner world and projecting it onto themselves through looking in the mirror and they looked the same. There was no change, but yet he had altered the construction of their physical reality so much that it's like, how can you not see this change? But
Absolutely.
their inner world was their true identity. It's not about the physical. And,
Yeah.
and then How to Win Friends and Influence People. Read that when I was younger.
Yeah.
The
What Dale?
Dale Carnegie.
No, Dale Carnegie, right? Yeah. Really good book. Absolutely. Yep.
Becoming Supernatural is another incredible one. But
Yeah.
fourth, I just got to add it. Um, Walking in the Physical. by
Mm.
Christian Sundberg. He
I'm gonna
had a
have to
near-death
note jot
experience
that
that
down.
blew his mind and blew my mind when I listened to that book on the audio version. And any podcast that Christian Sundberg is a part of, I've dove into those as well because I've gotten into near-death experiences over the last 6 or 7 months. My mom said, "You gotta check this out," so I did. And I listen to anywhere from 3 to 5 a day now. And I'm just realigned with my higher self when I listen to those because the experience of each person is so unique and personalized after they leave their bodies and have these out-of-body experiences wherever they go or whoever they talk to. But when they come back, they're changed in a very useful way to live out the rest of their physical lives, loving and accepting others more fully. They come back usually a lot of them, and I wanted to ask you about this with
Yeah,
certain
absolutely.
gifts, like precognition, knowing things before they're actually going to happen.
Mm.
Alignment comes much easier for them, and they flow with life instead of struggling through it and suffering. Um,
Precognition.
Before we do go back to your out of body experience, which
Yeah.
when I heard that, I was like, oh, I, I was like kind of blown away. I was like, he had a 2 week ordeal, I wonder what he saw. I wonder what kind of things he learned and came back with. But what are your three favorite
Yeah.
books?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really interesting. So Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Marks, that was the first book that I like consumed. I read
Huh.
it and then I listened to the audiobook when I first got out the army. My first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, Gustavo Dantas, really good guy. I got out and he knew I was a veteran. He's very, sympathetic to the veteran community. And we had a conversation after training. We talked for like 2 hours after training. And, he's, what I got out of that conversation, he was like, do yourself a favor, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Marks. And I read that, and it is absolutely true. It is true what they say. I see it now. Your brain, like he says in the book, your brain is a supercomputer that garbage in, garbage out, right? So you want to make sure you program it, you know, uh, in a way that lines with what you want to be. But my three books, and I'm kind of looking at them right now because it really depends. But when it comes to just kind of like spiritual growth and getting into that alignment, I'm going to recommend the first one because it's such an easy read, but it's so impactful is As a Man Thinketh by James Allen that was published in 1903. It's wisdom that's ageless. And what I got out of that one is that your thoughts are seeds that blossom into action. I just said that recently, but it's absolutely true. Whatever we do here, we're going to act here, right? So our thoughts blossom into action. I think my second book, I'm looking at my shelf over here. A recent book is just coming to my mind that's really helped me um, is going to be 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Berkman. Really, really good book. I think I got released like 2 years ago. Super good book. One of my good friends, Dr. Alex German, recommended it to me. It was actually my supervisor. Now we're just, we're friends and we have a relationship and where we share books. And I gotta say that he's winning on points because the books he recommends are so much better than the books I recommend. But the important thing about times management for mortals is that it really pushes the point that we are mortal and that we need to be comfortable with being comfortable with just doing what you can do for that day. Many times people live in a state of anxiety, of guilt, of stress because they just feel that I don't have enough time to do all these things. Well, guess what? You don't have to do all those things. It's up to you what you can do for that day. So big takeaway for that book is always do your best for that day, 100%. And then, you said becoming supernatural. So I was going to mention that too. That's also a really good one. You are the placebo. That's also good when we mention that. And I will say, a really good one. That's really another simple read, The Four Agreements by Juan
Mhm.
Manuel Ruiz, right? The Four Agreements have been, I still remember them. And the way that I use not only the free agreement, the four agreements, but also the way I use all books is that I revisit books whenever I need to solve a problem, and especially the four agreements, right? Which are always be impeccable with your word, right? Do what you say what you mean. right? Never take things personally, right? Never make assumptions, and always, always, always try your best, right? Just those four simple rules. If we adhere to that, your life will start blossoming. And then, and then just for and then I guess just um, one last book that I think I would recommend for anyone. I would say, I would say I would say Start With Why by Simon Sinek, right? Start With Why. It's really good, although it's
Love Simon
about
Sinek.
finding your purpose. Yeah, but although it's about like understanding the core principle and reason why an organization and a team does something. But the lessons he talks about in that book can be applied to anything in your life, especially when you're managing a nonprofit and a team. So those are mine. Anyways, I'll keep talking. I know that we will keep talking. You have your bookshelf there. I have mine over here. So yeah.
And the audio books that I download onto my phone, it's ridiculous. I've got over 100 now, and a few that I haven't listened to, but some of them I'll revisit yearly,
Yeah.
and listen to them
Yeah.
again and again. Stress
Yeah, for my
less, accomplish
workouts, it's
more.
audiobooks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the cool thing about our job, my wife and I actually work at Boeing. We make the
Okay.
Chinooks that you flew out on. We make the Apache
Nice.
helicopter,
Nice.
and we're part of that team, and that's been a great way to get financially stable together. But then what about the spiritual side, the emotional side, the mental side, the beliefs, and the systems that you use to create the
Yeah.
best possible reality you could live every day, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
revisiting the fourth agreement, I've actually got this. I read it all the time. It's right in front of me on my desk. The fourth
Yeah.
agreement, always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. And self-loathing and self-criticism goes away. If you can accept that I did my best today at the end of each day, and I love that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Yeah, and again, it ties into Oliver Berkman. Just one more recommendation. It should have been the first one I led with. I would say the Kybalion by the Three Initiates.
Just bought it.
Um, oh,
Super
perfect.
excited to
Yeah,
dive in, man.
it'll blow your mind considering that the information contained within that book is over 3,000 years old, but it can be applied and you can see that mathematics, physics, the, just any the scientific community as well as the spiritual, it just explains it all in such a way that makes sense. And for me, it just resonates as truth. So the
I
Kabbalion,
just
yeah,
got
check that out. I
goosebumps
want to hear
everywhere,
more.
bro. I just got
Yes, sir.
goosebumps. I'm
Yes,
like,
sir.
okay,
Yes, sir.
that's a sign.
Absolutely.
Have you listened to near-death experiences and what has stood out for you if you have? And then let's go into yours. Did you have an out-of-body experience? What did you see and
Right.
feel? What'd you come back with as a
Yeah.
gift?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really difficult. I haven't spoken about my experience on an interview before, so great question. Absolutely. So my near death experience, I was mentioning that I was walking on a beach. What I recall is walking on a beach alongside, of like a family member, like a father figure, like something, a little something in me said that's my dad. Although, in hindsight, I know my dad wasn't, that wasn't my dad, but it's like my father. And I could hear a lot of people laughing and talking, and they were behind these tall, beautiful green hedges, and I could see them sitting, but I couldn't interact or turn my head. The only thing I could do is when I would turn and try to pay attention to this being, I couldn't hear the words. It was just kind of like the message was being delivered. And what I would see is I would turn to my right and I would see just this endless vast ocean, and the sun was either setting or rising, but it was an orange horizon, and I could see small islands kind of penetrating through the water in the distance. And every time I would walk forward, this thing would kind of guide me towards this building, and it was like we were walking on the beach for such a long time, and all I could remember hearing is the splashing of water, like the waves that crash. I could hear that because we're on the beach. And then I could also hear the birds, right? I could hear like an owl, like hoo 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 hoo. Like I could hear like nature. Um and and um And when I wanted to, I didn't want to leave, like I mentioned. And when they walked me into this building, it was like seamless. It was literally, I remember walking to this building, being laid down, and then I was like awake the 7 days. Like it's not like I woke up and oh, I'm here. I was like if I was awake the entire time. So it wasn't necessarily an out of body experience that you would see traditionally. But this is what's interesting, Pete. Have you ever heard of 5-MeO DMT?
Oh yeah.
Right. So I had my first shamanic led 5-MeO DMT experience. And it was absolutely transformative for me. By that time I have had already done tons of healing through plant medicine. And then having the opportunity to do this medicine in a safe and legal environment, it was profound. And I can get into that experience, but
Oh yeah, I hope so.
yeah, I felt that. I was back. I wasn't necessarily on the beach. Like I didn't have no hallucinations. I didn't have any of that. I was everything and nothing at the same time. I was experience every sensation that ever existed. But what was very similar that brought me back to that experience was the sounds of nature, the crashing waves, and the feeling inside me that I didn't want to go, that I was part of this. And so what I have journaled about and taken away from that is that, and again, people are going to have their own ideas, but from my interpretation, and I'm still learning from these experiences, is that there is a point in where I was part of this universal consciousness that's part of all of us, that's part of every single individual blade of grass, to every tree, every animal, every human, this universal consciousness. And being part of that, at the end of the line is love and understanding that everything is interconnected in some way and being again I am nothing, or I'm not the Ulysses, the identity, but I'm also a part of everything. And I feel that that out of body experience is actually my consciousness going back to source, to God, to heaven, whatever you call it, and existing there. And then me needing to come back for whatever purpose and having like not wanting to leave because I want to be part of who we really are. Like we mentioned, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And so that was impactful for me. So
Wow, out of almost every single one that I've listened to, there's a similar wording in what they say after they come back. They say that they fought it. They did not want to come back into the body and inhabit and animate it anymore. They were at peace. They were enveloped in love and perfection, and they just did not want to go back into the human experience. And uh,
mhm.
they were made to, or they were given a choice, and they were shown what would happen if they didn't, the ripple effects that would go out. And so then they're like, okay, damn it, I have to. Even though I want to stay
Yeah,
here, I have to go back. And inevitably, so many of them were not okay. They experienced severe depression, alienation. They couldn't really talk about their experience because, over the decades, people were like, no, it's just the medication. You didn't actually see that. They were dumbed down and quieted. And more people are coming forth and saying, no, I'm going to stand in my truth. I'm going to lean into this. I did see that. This was my experience. And it's very personal and beautiful for each of them. So
yeah,
that's interesting. I thank you for
yeah,
sharing that. I know that
yeah,
that makes you kind of vulnerable, but it
yeah,
also makes you real and honest. And I love
yeah,
that
yeah.
integrity.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Pete. And like I mentioned, I'm still learning from that because there's still, there's there from time to time when I go through something or an experience that reminds me of that event of it's a gentle reminder that it's just a human experience. We're actual spiritual beings connected to the universal consciousness, right?
Oh, can I
You know,
interject something real quick
yeah, yeah,
here?
yeah,
It just
yeah,
reminded me of something that happened. So I did have a near-death experience when I was 17, came back with a few
yeah,
different
please.
gifts, like precognition, the reading of vibrational energies and frequencies, where I have a knowing of something that's about to happen. And it's kind of strange. But another thing that happened was I have what I would call, I guess, waking visions. I'll be sitting there at
Mm,
night. I'm not even drifting off to sleep. I'm not tired. I'm wide awake. And then bam, I have this, and it sounds crazy, but on one
no,
of them, And this just happened a few years ago where I was pulled off the earth, out of my body, way out into the universe. I saw the planet Earth over here, and I looked, and there was like this squid-like octopus or something, and it had like these big round eyes. It was like a cartoon figure, and a yellow beak, and it had this half grin, a little chubby cheek, and it telepathically was communicating. It we didn't know the same language, or maybe we did, and it's not a language like English or Spanish or anything.
Mhm.
But I got the message, look, and I looked down and I watched every one of these trillions of tentacles coming off this thing. And at the end of each tentacle was an animal, a tree, a human. And it was like little puppet show. It sounds nuts, but I
No, no, no,
watched
no, no. I like the interpretation.
it was experiencing trillions of lives simultaneously. And and each tentacle had a flow of light coming up, like the information from each of these experiences being lived out on the planet
Yeah,
Earth.
yeah.
And immediately I sat up in bed. I'm like, what was that? Is that consciousness? That's like a visual depiction or idea that helped me understand consciousness a little more fully.
Absolutely.
I'm like, are we all just part of that one thing that's experiencing all of these trillions of lives simultaneously? I was like, it was mind blowing. I just had to share that.
No, please. I'm glad you said that because it's absolutely like how I what I take away from that. It's confirmation that, you know, all's this human experience is and the blade of grass experience and the bird experience, what all that experience is the universe experiencing themselves or itself through the human body, right? Through plants, through animals, right? But it's basically the universe experiencing itself unfolding and existing. But I wanna come like you're not, I don't think you're wrong in your interpretation at all, right? Have you ever heard of the gateway tapes?
Yeah, and I did have an
Okay,
out of body doing that one time on just the first
perfect,
one of the 53
perfect,
tapes, and it scared the shit out of me, bro.
perfect. That's actually the gateway tapes is what got me into meditation, and so now
Oh,
I'm able to do it because of it, right? Whether it's um, whether it's the first, second, or third tape, whatever the exercise that I want to go through, right? I'll listen to that. But what I wanted to share is you should check out, and I'll send it to you, a paper that was declassified in 2003. There was a study done by the DoD and the CIA that spanned from the 1960s, and then it was finally published in 83. And it's actually a paper, it's a memo from, I forget the colonel's name. I have it here. I'll send it to you. But the paper is called Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Tapes. And what it basically is that, and I'll send it to you so you can check it out. Definitely lead with that after we talk. It's going to confirm a lot of the consciousness understandings that you and I are sharing. But basically, what they state is that they confirm that there are out of body experiences, right? But the military calls that remote viewing. I'm sure that you've already
hmm
seen people when
hmm
people remote view, it's also an out of body experience, but the remote view they're basically shifting their consciousness in another place and time, and it's kind of like quantum entanglement, right? They and in that book they talk a lot about theoretical quantum physics, consciousness, and this is a military paper that was classified as top secret in 1983 or classified secret or top secret, whatever. It wasn't shared with the population until for 20 years until 2003. But another interesting thing about it is that in this paper, what the Department of Defense found is that, or the CIA rather, what they found is that like and this goes into precognition, the past, present, and future, it's all unfolding at the same time. It's all happening at the same time. We're just stuck in this linear view of space and time because we have limited consciousness. And what the purpose of the paper was how do we militarize and weaponize human consciousness? The interesting thing, and here I'm just and what I'm doing right now, I'm about to speculate, but what I believe from that and them declassified. If you notice in 1983 moving forward, our music got negative, our movies got negative. We started having drugs be pumped into communities. We started, really, you know, uh, I guess hijacking the American culture and then the global culture and kind of injecting people with useless information to hijack their consciousness.
Mm.
And it's all because, according to assessment, the analysis and the an assessment of the gateway process, um, the whole purpose, when it comes to remote viewing, when it comes to understanding, they mentioned the infinite consciousness that lives in our minds. When it comes to out of body experiences of remote viewing, all that is true. Time being the present, past, and future, all unfolding at the same time. We just lack the consciousness to understand that. Because of that, right, they're able to then weaponize certain tools and propaganda in order to disconnect us from the people that we truly are meant to be. Really interesting paper. I think you got to check it out. It'll make sense with your experience of this this being with tentacles moving consciousness, because it really talks about that all this, this physical reality that we all experience, it's not really true. That the true nature of reality is consciousness and the vibration, atoms, and energies that happen at atomic and even smaller level that we don't have the technical capabilities to measure. Interesting paper, really interesting paper. I'll make sure to get that to you, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That brings up a few things. The energy that we are that animates these bodies for a human experience. I've realized that what we put out there comes back to us energetically, but what we focus on, we feed energetically. And so the powers that be or whoever realizes these things and doesn't want the masses to know anything about it, I believe they've strategically placed an overconsumption ability through social media or the news or all this propaganda, like you're talking about, in order to distract us from our true self, our highest nature as source, right? And all the energy and the consciousness that we truly are. And if we know what we do want in life, like if we wrote down a list of everything we want to focus on today, right now, and only focused on that, then all that energy that's being displaced all over the place and being scattered and taken away from us without us even realizing it would all sort of come together to make that list our reality. And when we focus on what we do want, what we don't want naturally and easily just flows away. And our reality starts to unfold more in alignment with that list of what we do want. So we're constantly being fed all of these things that we don't want to experience more of in our lives, the fear, the panic, the mistrust, the disloyalty. But
Right.
if we want to experience all of that within ourselves, that's what we then project onto the screen of life, you know?
Right. That's absolutely beautiful. It reminds me of three hermetic principles that I'm about to butcher. So those that are watching, please correct it in the comments. But I think it's principle number three or four. It's called the principle of cause and effect. That it's a universal principle that exists, that for every single cause there's an effect, and for every effect there is a cause. That there's no such thing as randomness, right? That everything happens for a reason. It's just we lack the tools and technology, or to or a way to define it as such, right? But things every effect has a cause. But it also reminds me of the second principle, which is the principle of correspondence, and basically from above, so below, from below, so above, and basically everything, and it goes with the cause and effect. Newtonian physics says that every has an equal and opposite reaction. Well, the principle of correspondence, according to the Hermetics, is that the same thing, right? If there is an effect if we're looking at a sphere and there is an effect that happens on this side of the sphere, there's going to be, or in a cause a cause that happens on this side, there's going to be an effect on the opposite side of the field. Now, how does that relate to consciousness? Well, look at the first principle of Hermeticism, which is the principle of mentalism, right? Everything is mind is mental, right? That basically we all live in this infinite consciousness that we call the universe, but if we're looking at the same, if we're also looking at the principle of correspondence, if there's an infinite consciousness and this universal consciousness that exists out here, then it's also true that it exists out here. So if you want your universe that you perceive every day to, you have to change the universe in your mind first. This becomes the cause. The universe, what gives you back, that's the effect. And so really understanding that, and again, this kind of goes to meditation and introspection, right? Really understanding the importance of quieting your mind and visualizing. We could all talk. We could all like have affirmations, and I think those are great, right? You want to put those in your mind. I use affirmations every morning as part of my meditation and when I'm working out, right? Because I want to win the day. But it's a lot deeper than that. It's about creating the person and the reality that you deserve within your mind, so your physical reality can correspond as such. So pretty, you're gonna really enjoy the Kybalion.
Mm. As within,
Yeah.
so without. Back to dimethyltryptamine. I did have a source years ago that I trusted. They gave me a pen to hit, and I would, before meditating and doing Wim Hof and all this stuff, I would go out, I would look at the sun, and I would hit that pen, and then I would close my eyes and keep looking at the sun. And the visual effect that I got and the message that was downloaded was, all I saw was this beautiful array of geometric patterns that were symmetrical and perfectly placed, almost as if the back of my eyelids was revealing a huge screen upon which I could
Mhm.
then project my inner world. And it reminded me of the
Mhm.
Truman Show, when he eventually broke through that screen of life that he was living within. And it was mind blowing and very empowering for me to realize that, as within, so without, the inner reality that I'm repeating in my thoughts then produces a chemical cocktail within the mind and the heart. And then within two pumps of the heart in this body, it's reached over, 80,000 miles of veins and blood vessels. And then that produces a magnetic flow that pulsates out from my body. This is all found in Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, Joe Dispenza. They talk about these
Yeah,
things.
absolutely.
And to know that, I listen to Abraham Hicks every morning when I'm getting ready. I have for months or years, now, and it always talks about, the feeling is the most important thing. How we feel is what we will attract.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
it's not the thinking, it's the magnetic pulse that goes out and then attracts every like
Absolutely.
person, circumstance, situation, thing.
Mhm.
And so if we feel good all the time, which is possible, I've found out,
Yeah.
regardless of the chaos and turmoil of the outer world and all the distractions available to us through our five senses, we
Hmm.
can have an inner world that's still and calm and peaceful at all times, regardless. And when we feel that way, what we attract and what unfolds and flows through us and creates this human existence that we're observing, that we call our personal reality, it is magical.
No, absolutely. I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I was just looking it up because I don't want to get eaten up at the on the comments. So the cause and effect was number six, but there is the fifth principle, the principle of rhythm, right? So you just mentioned, and it's absolutely true, that the way that you feel that resonates out there creates this energy that then pulls in, gravitates the outcome of those very much complex emotions, right? And it leads me to the idea of mental transmutation, and I'll talk about that in a little bit,
Mm.
right? But the principle of rhythm, it's very important because everything flows, right? Everything has a rise and everything has a fall. It's infinitely true when we look at the vibrations of atoms, when we look at sine waves, when we look just at the pattern of human life. We have ups and downs. It's gonna happen. But what the Hermetics found out is that there is this thing called they what we would interpret as mental transmutation, right? Earlier I mentioned that I mentioned the second principle, the principle of correspondence, right? That there there's always going to be a polar, or I will say not a polar, but there will always be an inverse of whatever that position is or that feeling or that emotion. And the power of mental transmutation is being able to understand that that there is a rhythm out there, but if you catch it and you understand the polar or the chorus, the polar emotion that's associated with what you don't want to feel, and you tap into that, then you will change your mindset and you will stop the rhythm of plummeting downward. And so the reason why I bring that up is because I recently went through something. I recently went through something. This was actually November through our Veterans Day ceremony. I was driving down, and probably can't tell, but I suffer from anxiety from time to time. I actually took some of my anxiety meds before we came here, right? But one of my good buddies was mentioning that we were talking about mental transmutation, and then I just had to drop that, hey, he wanted me to be on a podcast, and I said, hey, I'm really nervous, and this is what got me here, right? He said, we were just talking about mental transmutation. What is the opposite effect of anxiousness, of nervousness? And I was like, man, I don't know. And he's like, excitement.
Mhm.
Excitement. So if you're excited, if you know you're starting to feel that, feel excited. And since November to present time, that's what I've been using. In fact, I'm really excited to be here, Pete. Right? Before then, it was easier for me to define the simpler emotions, right? From like hate and anger, you have love and compassion. From sadness, you have laughter and joy, so on and so forth. But when you start getting into these more complex emotions like anxiety and nervousness, it's more for me, at least personally, it's more difficult to define. But understanding that, I understand that what I put out, I'm going to attract back, right? And so I'm still a student, I'm still learning, but I'm experiencing just that as I have been since November to present time, more and more excited about life and being here and being part of others and being part of something meaningful. The universe is corresponding by bringing wonderful people like you in my life. So
Oh, yeah. I
thank you
love
for bringing
that,
that
man.
up.
Yeah, that's the power of the reframe. I mean, you can take any one topic at any one moment in time, like anxiety, like my breathing changes, it becomes more shallow. I have less oxygen and blood flow going through my body, and my heart starts to feel a certain way. It closes, it tightens, and I can't think right. And then all of a sudden I think, oh no, I'm not anxious or nervous. I'm excited. Oh man, this is actually exciting. And you breathe deeper, you get more oxygen to the brain and you think better, and then you act better, you do better, and you just are better when you can
Mhm.
reframe something negative into a positive. And it's like, the people talk about toxic positivity and all that crap, and I'm like, I don't believe in that, man. I believe there's positive and negative, and you get to choose what you want to focus on at any one moment in time. Just be
Absolutely.
present here now in excitement and that anxiety lifts and it goes away, man. I'd like to get back to your the rest of your army experience. You were in the infantry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
okay?
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So I was an infantryman, like mentioned, I got shot. And I had to relearn how to teach myself or read. I had to teach myself how to read again, rather.
Yeah.
I had to teach myself how to read again. That's what led me to I love to read. That's how I fell back in love with reading, is because it's something that I didn't have. You'd really appreciate something once you lose it. And
Hmm.
so for me, it took a while, but also one of the things that I read while I was in recovery was the Jump Master Handbook, right? In the 82nd Airborne Division, as a paratrooper, you are pushed to go to Jump Master, right? And so I did not want to leave my unit. I was part of this brotherhood and all this, and then I got shot. And the talk from the army was like, yeah, you're going to get medically retired at so young, and it's just like something that I was not ready for.
How old were you at
And
that point? How many years had you been in?
I think I was 21. I
Okay, so
think
2 years.
because at 19, no, 20, I was 20, not 21. I was 20.
Ah,
So I was, yeah. So no, 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 hold on. 19, I went in when I was 19. Yeah, yep, 19. Yeah, no, I was 20 years old. And so when it took me a while to learn how to read, right? It's trying to get back to it because I didn't want to. I learned how to read, and I also didn't want to get kicked out of my unit, right? I didn't want to get medically retired, and so when I chose, hey, I want to go back to Fort Bragg. Yeah, you're gonna go back to rear detachment. I got shot so early in the deployment that my unit was still deployed out there, and so I read that Jump Master Handbook. Eventually, my reenlistment opportunity came up, and I said, "Hey, I want to reenlist, but I want to stay in my unit." And so part of the agreement with the recruiter, I'm based when you're going to get reenlisted is that they would send me down range to finish the deployment with my guys, and then I'm going to reenlist down there so I could get it tax free, the bonus tax free. So I redeployed with 2 months left in the deployment, right? It was a month deployment. And when I get there, the only thing that I was doing is like raising my hand and getting and reenlisting and then coming back with my unit. I remember I got there, my same spiel to everybody. And hopefully one day, Pete, outside of this or even on your podcast, I'll introduce you to some of my great leaders that are still good friends of mine. But I went to, I started out with the battalion commander. At the time, it was Lieutenant Colonel Menace. And, if I wanted to stay in, they're like, hey, plead your case to the battalion commander. I go to the battalion commander. I'm standing in front of his office downrange in Afghanistan and Kandahar. And I said, my name is Private First Class Lopez, so on and so forth. I really want to be here, and I kind of pleaded my case, and he said, well, go talk to First Sergeant Quinn if he has a position for you, right? I was in Alpha Company. He was the new first sergeant. I talked to First Sergeant Quinn, who now is like a guy that he's changed my life in so many ways throughout my military career. So I spoke to First Sergeant. First Sergeant Quinn was like this dude that was like 6'5", freaking chiseled god dude. Like he was just a specimen. So I go and I talk to him, and he's like, Private Lopez, he was like, well, go talk to Platoon Sergeant Strickland, First Sergeant Strickland. Sergeant First Class Strickland, the platoon sergeant for third platoon, see if you can get a job. So I go and I plead my case, and he's a Lumbee Native American. That's a tribe in North Carolina, South Carolina. He has his accent, and he's like, go talk to your old squad, see if they got room for you. And I talked to my squad, and I was so happy. They were like, "Yeah, we'll take Lopez." But here's the interesting thing: when I got shot, First Sergeant at the what's it called? First Sergeant Quinn wasn't the acting first sergeant, and then Sergeant First Class Strickland wasn't the platoon sergeant. The platoon sergeant when I got shot was Sergeant First Class Keith Newman. I'll fix that for sorry, my bad if you're listening. But what was interesting is when I went back to my unit, to the platoon, when I was walking in, one of the first buddies I seen was my buddy Chewy, right? And he comes up and he's like, Yo, Lopez. He like dropped whatever he was carrying. He was like, We thought you died. There was no information that went back to the unit about my well-being throughout the entire deployment. They were just
Oh,
operational back to back to back. So everybody had assumed that I had died or I was like chaptered out of the military. And so then other guys come out, they're like, Yo, Lopez, you're here, big old hug and everything. And then the second thing they tell me is like, Bro, you fucking pissed yourself, which I did because I needed to see, and
yeah, that's
that
normal.
was priority to let it out. I was not
Yeah,
not that I was scared. I might have been, but that's not why I peed.
yeah, yeah.
But the point is that the second thing. And so went back to my unit, went back to the dues, became a jump master. I was at a period of time, I was one of the youngest jump masters, if not the youngest jump master in the 82nd Airborne Division. Instead of
Man,
becoming a specialist, yeah, they gave me my corporal stripes, and because you can only be you have to be an NCO to go to jump master school. And I'll tell you one thing, man, being a jump master, especially being the company air, right? The person that's responsible of organizing all the jumps and the training for the soldiers of your company was a fantastic experience because it allowed me to build relationship across not only the entire company but the entire battalion. And kind of the downside with that is that you build relationships with people that you may not serve with, in combat because they're not part of your squad or your platoon, but it's people in the battalion that you've did duties with. You guys were at this spot for 24, 48 hours, pulling security during training or coordinating this jump. And then because you're so disconnected, just randomly throughout deployment, you hear a name, they died, they were killed in action. And it sucks. I mean, it's like a double-edged sword. You get to serve be the battalion and be a part of, a bigger group, a bigger brotherhood. But the downside is that you also increase your chance of vulnerability because you risk losing people that you create relationships with. You know, talking about my experience in the army. My second deployment was, absolutely freaking mind blowing, and there was a lot of growth for me there. So let me let me tell you how I got my citizenship. Really cool story. So right before our second deployment, my Lieutenant Colonel, David Aucklander, he was a new battalion commander. He's also a really good friend of mine. I just spoke to him recently. I was talking to my mom, and this guy, he looks like he's a white guy, like blonde hair, blue eye, da da da. But I guess he's Argentinian, and I didn't know that. And so he overheard me talking to my mom. I was talking to my mom. We're talking about my paperwork because I need to apply for my citizenship. I'm still a resident, and so on and so forth. And he overhears that. I kind of snap, boom. I hang out with my mom, and he's like, "Hey, Sergeant Lopez." He's like, "Can you tell me more about your citizenship?" And I say, "Well, I got my residency when I was 15, and my mom put in the paperwork for me to get my citizenship, but I've been deployed, and I just haven't had time, and now we're about to deploy again, and the last thing I want is for something to happen, and I don't have my U.S. citizenship." So he said, "Grab all your paperwork," and this was like on a Thursday. "Grab all your paperwork and come and see me in my office, the close of business on Friday." So come Friday, I'm in his office. I present, Sergeant Lopez reporting for duty. Boom, or reported as ordered. Boom. He's like, "Yeah, come on in." I give him my paperwork. He calls somebody that calls somebody that calls somebody, and eventually it goes up to the immigration services, right? And Monday morning comes around. I get a call from, immigration. I forget the office who does all this. But they they call me and they're like, "Hey, we have an appointment for you on Wednesday, that Wednesday, to come get, you got to get tested. They test your history, they kind of quiz you to make sure you go through a series of questions to make sure that you qualify for citizenship." So apparently, because I got shot, and because he said, "Hey, this dude got shot for our country already. He's missing a portion of his lung, right? And he is an outstanding person. Let's get him a citizenship." So that Wednesday, the following Wednesday, I was up in Raleigh, North Carolina, answering those questions. And then come Friday, we were having a battalion party, huge battalion party before we deploy. And the platoon says, "Hey, we're gonna do room inspections, right?" And I'm like, in the middle of a party. And so all the NCOs go and they go into the barracks and they start doing room inspections. And then we end up going into a room and they push me in there. The entire platoon goes in there and they open up the fridge and we have these big old tall boys. And right off the bat, they start like, "Here, Lopez, you're gonna pound him." And I don't know, like, why me, right? Why me? Like, why are you guys pounding him? And there was other soldiers that were taking him with me, right? But I was the center and I was like, "Why me?" Right? And so we go back for the out briefing, and in that out briefing, Lieutenant Colonel Aucklander says, "And I want to bring up a brother of us from the battalion, Sergeant Lopez. Would you come up here?" Boom. I go up there, and he says, "Sergeant Lopez is a great example of an American." And he talked about me a little bit, and he says, "With that being said, Sergeant Lopez, you have an appointment with the immigration office on base by the 18th Airborne Corps to swear in." I was like, "What?"
Like right then,
Very like yeah, that day
hammered
right
and
after
all.
that, hammered and all. Well, I didn't feel it. I wasn't feeling the beer until I pulled up and I
Of
started
course.
feeling like, man, look,
Oh,
I don't drink now. I don't drink now, but when I did drink, I get emotional. So as I'm in the room and they have a recording of President Obama. He's talking about people. He's talking about soldiers that sacrifice so much and they deserve their citizenship. Basically, a speech letting us know, hey, like welcome to the Brotherhood of Citizenship or whatever the words he used. I was drunk, mind you, but I started when my name came up. My platoon was in the back. There's some guys that were hammered. We're like, "Yeah, Lopez." And I'm just coming up and I'm just feeling it. And I get up there and I'm just kind of tearing up. Of course, my unit gave me shit for that, but it was super cool, man.
dude, he
Um,
streamlined your whole process, and that's how it
like that.
should be, in my opinion. Hell yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's many good leaders across the military that do that. That really go back out. They go to bat for all their soldiers despite the position that they're in, whether they're the lowest or the highest ranking. And this person, I mean, even now, like I have a friendship with him. He mentored me when I got out of the military, and I was like, I was experiencing suicidal ideation. And I remember talking to him again. This was a lieutenant colonel, then worked at the Pentagon. Like I'm just a freaking a guy that got medically retired. And he's taking the time of his day to kind of coach me. He's one of the first influences that led me back to reading books that actually build my character and build my consciousness. So it was very powerful, man. My second deployment, I was just mentioning it. Um, it was an interesting deployment because I had gotten shot and that was in my mind a lot. Like, man, I'm gonna get shot again and something's gonna happen. So I was very hyper vigilant. All my training up to that point, even there, I would take it. I would take all my training, and even now I take it seriously because I didn't want that to happen to any of my soldiers. And I eventually ended up at the Argandal River Valley in this fob called Fob Lane. And once the spring, the fighting season starts, you get rocketed a lot. Or in the middle of the night or when the sun's going down, the insurgents will use plunging fire from a mountain that was really close to our base to go into our fob. And so throughout like spring and summer, it was every day or every other day we were getting hit with indirect, whether it's mortars or 107 millimeter Chinese rockets or plunging fire from the hillside. So we were just getting harassed. And so in that experience, it was tough because I just mentioned I developed relationships with everybody in the battalion, and throughout the year, through the radio, right, it comes out that this person got killed, right, or that person got killed, and I always took it hard because this is the guy that he just got married and he has a little one and he has a little guy and he needs to jump, but this is going to be the last time he's going to see his wife. So I'm going to just pencil whip that he jumps so I can let him go because I like him and he's a young dude. And that's the same young dude that ended up dying, and it was it was tough, man. And it's still tough. I think like, you know, so those types of experiences, my second deployment, it really just started bringing me to understanding the importance of people and the fragility of life, right? You're literally having a cigarette with your buddy, a dude that you've done shoot shakeout or many jump details with, and he's the NCO, and because he's the NCO of the detail and I'm the NCO of my part, we're there freaking late and we're there freaking early. And I'm smoking the cigarette with him, and then just like 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, I'm lifting up like pieces of a car off of his body and he's missing his legs and his arms, and I'm watching him take his last breath. And it was hard, man. And I didn't get an opportunity to process that then.
Mhm.
I just kind of sucked it up because I was a sergeant. I watched my
Yeah.
buddy take his last breath.
There's no
I
time. You
watched him.
can't. It's dangerous to process through that right then and there, man.
No, man. And I just experienced those things, and all I can do is like, hey, I'm gonna get my soldiers and we gotta pull security and just kind of swallow it, man. And so coming back, coming back in that second deployment, it was tough because I had a lot of I couldn't I said it before, but I say it now because it's still, I still something I struggle with, but like quieting the gunfire in my head, the regret, the things that you could have done better, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was really tough. And my leaders recognized that. So when I got back, they said, "Hey, Ulysses, you need a break, dude. You got hit your first deployment. I was wounded again my second deployment. I took a little bit of shrapnel on my leg when they were trying to overrun our fob, and it wasn't even I didn't even want to go to become a black hat. So this led me into, we're going to talk about jujitsu a little bit. I didn't want to become a jump master instructor, but one of my buddies who was a sergeant, who was the head of the fight school at on Fort Bragg, I called him. I said, "Hey, man, fucking first sergeant and the battalion commander are telling me I need a break and I need to find a job at one of the schoolhouses here, and I don't want to be a black hat. I don't want to be a jump master instructor. Do you got a spot?" And he said I had to compete for it, which I did. I ended up going through level one, level two. I got hired as a combatives instructor. And jujitsu was my first pathway to healing and building that community, because jujitsu, and at its core, yeah, it's definitely a martial art, but it's also a meditative, right? And it's an
Mhm.
opportunity to be introspective, especially you just with when people suffer together, people like training together, like training hard together. You develop this bond, this brotherhood, and you're allowed to be vulnerable. And I remember talking to one of my good buddies, and I really look up to him. His name is Jesse Herzog. He's a Christian man, family man, loving man, but he's also, I would argue, he's one of the baddest on the planet walking right now. He was the All Army champion he was an All Army champion, I think 2 years in a row, winning the tournament. I mean, he's a really talented fighter, but he's also such a good person. So I started I started healing in that regard. And when I went back to the line, I dropped an SF packet. When I had to do my physical, something that nobody had ever looked at, the battalion cert or the the medical provider, the provider that was doing the physical, he looked through my medical record and he's like, dude, you got brain damage, you're missing a portion of your lung, you just got wounded, and you still haven't even dealt with the emotional impact of your experiences. He's like, look, you're gonna make it. And by then, Pete, I was a stud, dude. I was maxing the PT score, the PT test consistently. I could run 11-minute miles. I would be doing 90 to 100 push-ups within 2 minutes, over 100 sit-ups within the time span. Like I was a physical specimen, and he acknowledged that. He's like, you're gonna make it. You're in really good shape because you're young, but by the time you are done with the training, 4 years down the line, your body is gonna be broken, and you might not be all here. Is this something you want to do? Says, look, I'm in a position to put in a recommendation to be medically retired, right? Or medically chaptered. The retirement versus just being separated, that decision doesn't come until later. But
Mhm.
I had spoken to my girlfriend at the time, and kind of I had already divorced my first wife, and I missed my son, and it all just kind of it was right. It was just the right time for me. And so I always say the best decision I've ever made was going into the military, and the second best decision I've ever made was getting out.
Mhm.
And that experience, getting out of the military, it was a very eye-opening experience because like you start you there's you start getting to a point in where your mind is allowed to be quiet because you're always if you're on the line or you're training, and I love jujitsu and mixed martial arts. So when you're training, you're just always busy, so you don't get time to really think. And in that point of transitioning, this is when the demons started coming out and like the pain and kind of just started reliving the memories. And it was hard, man. It was hard. So my
Uh,
transition out was hard, dude.
from what I understand, that is one of the most difficult times for people when they start getting quiet, and then they start finding tools that really work, like drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
and they lean into that because it gets them out of their head, But
Right.
Lisa Nichols once said something that was powerful. She said, "The antidote to pain and suffering is movement. It's action." And when we can get out of our heads, it's useful sometimes when we're in a dark place. But it's also super important, I think, to get in there and process through emotions and do that inner work. And man, it is a dark world. And sometimes you feel like
Yeah.
you're the only one. There's something wrong with you. You're completely disassociated from everyone.
Yeah.
You're alone. And the suicidal ideation is definitely something that I would be wrong not to bring it up. Um,
Yeah.
my wife and I were watching a movie called Thank You for Your Service, right? Came out in 2008, and it was powerful. It was impactful. Both my kids, one was in the Marines and one was in the Army, and then my third one wasn't in the military, nor was I. But watching this movie really hit us, man. We were freaking tears and snot rolling down our face, because we recognized, that, hey, my boys have experienced this kind of thing, and so many hundreds of thousands of other soldiers have, and your story is unique and personal to you, but there's so many people that have gone like on the Sean Ryan podcast, the Joe Rogan show, and they've shared their personal experiences, and there's a thing called trauma bonding, where that brotherhood is bonded through trauma, their shared trauma, the experiences that they survived and lived through. But then suicide becomes an option, and it always is, but suicide is a topic that I speak to a lot about. I write about it a lot. I don't really want to see people ending their lives earlier than when, what would have been lived out and unfolded for that individual had they not chose to check out right then and there. And what I can say is, I've attempted many times, specifically within that 15-year period, when I was on those antidepressants and the mood stabilizers that were supposed to be helping me. Personally, for me, it caused much more harm. And I haven't revisited or had suicidal ideation since getting off those pills in 2014. Well, what does that mean? I, are these pills tailored to destroy or to help? Some people, they take these pills and it helps them, but there's so many where it just doesn't. And what are some alternative ways, to become you again, to get well inside and upstairs, and become whole? And that's
Yeah.
a good transition, I think, to go into what you now do, what your life
Yeah.
purpose is, what your mission is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, everything you said is absolutely true. And to your point, in terms of like prescription medications, I'm not saying that they don't work. For some, they may, but from my perspective, they're a band-aid to the actual underlying problem that needs to be
Mhm.
addressed. All
Hell
it
yeah.
does is mask the issue. And then once you don't have those substances, and that's true with alcohol, it's true for weed, marijuana, or any other substance that you may use to kind of cover that trauma. So absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the Aya mission. My transition out of the military, like I mentioned, was tough. In fact, I got out 2 weeks later. I was in college, and no opportunity to kind of just sit there, and the memories and the emotions kept coming up, and it was very difficult to assimilate, right? Nobody was good enough, and I wasn't good enough, and I had attempted suicide when I was in the army. And I had, my wife, my second wife at that time, her father had gifted her a gun. I would always look at that gun as a very, uh, like a very tempting solution to all this pain, to just quiet the gunfire in my mind, which is
Yeah, I get
ironic.
it.
Yeah. That you would use gunfire to quiet the gunfire.
Right.
And it was tough, man. And so in 2017, in 2017, I was saving up to that point. I had got introduced to the idea of ayahuasca. One of my army buddies had gone to Peru and sat through a medicine through an ayahuasca ceremony, and his transformation was inspiring. I mean, he did a total 180, and this is years before I got out, and so I was slowly saving money, but I didn't have any financial knowledge, so I wasn't saving successfully, but I was trying to save up money to go to Peru. And then it turns out that through religious freedom protection laws here in Arizona, ayahuasca as well as other substances are protected under as a sacramental use, right? And I got introduced to the Arizona Yahe Assembly, which is Arizona's largest ayahuasca church, that they're based out in Tucson. And so I sent them a message, and they're like, "Yeah, come down. No preparation, no nothing. Just I'm gonna go down there and take the medicine, right?" Now, just real quick for your viewers that don't know, ayahuasca is a tea that's it's an indigenous brew that comes from the Amazon, and it's created using two different plants, the ayahuasca vine and the chacruna leaf. And by combining those and creating this tea, right, you go through a very powerful, at times hallucinogenic, at times emotional, like this emotional roller coaster. But what it does, it creates an internal space of introspection where you have to face your demons. And my first ayahuasca experience was absolutely terrifying, Pete. It was absolutely terrifying, to the point that I couldn't make sense of what I saw. It was just the chaos that my life was, and what I got out of it now, years down the line, now that I've reflected on it. It was just the chaos that's in my mind and in my soul being shown to me, and it was absolutely terrifying. I just remember this primal fear that I had felt like once when I was a child, right? I was the monster, the boogeyman. It was just really, really freaky. And so I told the lead facilitator, Scott, and but I told him I didn't have money to come back, right, for a donation. And it's a church. He was like, you don't have to donate. He was like, come back, please. My wife and I want you to come back. And so I went back soon after for my next ayahuasca ceremony. And then that was the beginning of the transformation. You know, I in my in that second ceremony, I had to relive a lot of experiences that I had subconsciously blamed myself for. And, a specific experience, and one of my buddies drowned based off of a decision I made in combat. I had completely repressed that memory, and it was just brought out. And I seeing different. I mentioned one of my buddies, uh, being killed by a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device and a V-bed. And having to relive those, I had up to that point, Pete, I had kind of like forgot about the details, and it all came back, and it was so painful. And I just remember going back to in the middle of the ceremony and telling Scott, "Man, this is like so painful. I need to make it stop." And he was very gentle and very kind. He was like, "Brother, it's okay. Just take it and just breathe." And then as like the experience started coming back, because with ayahuasca comes and ebbs and flows, right? I just felt finally like this, the first feeling of serenity. It's just, I can still remember because it's very impactful. It's like I felt like this slow uh, droplet coming toward my chest. And as soon as it hit me, it's just like my entire body is just let it go, surrender.
Mm.
And then I was gone and just experiencing the love and the unity and the forgiveness and, just understanding that those things happen, but it's not my fault. That we were all we were all basically fucking kids making these life and death decisions that's not normal. And I was only doing the best that I could at that time. And so that was really tough, man. And so through the following years, from 2017 to 2021, I sat through ayahuasca whenever I felt the calling. And it wasn't until, 2021, one of my buddies, his name is Bradley Abbott, he called me and he said, "I'm about to kill myself, man." And he had told me this like this November, and this was on December. Around December, I went and I sat with the medicine. And the biggest thing that I got out of the medicine was like, you found this, 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 this process that works for you, share it with your brothers. And it's just like an epiphany, like,
Mhm.
I need to share it with my brothers, right? And as soon as I got out, it was just immediately me and the co-founder Ronnie Folk, we just said the Aya mission. We both like, yeah, the Aya mission. And so, that was the founding of the Aya mission. And in 2021, we ended up, or yeah, it was 2021, 2020. It was December, and then 2021 we founded it. We filed all the paperwork here in Arizona, but we then flew Bradley here. And, I flew him into my house, flew him to Arizona from, I think he was in Idaho, and he went through consecutive ayahuasca ceremonies. And just seeing Bradley's transformation was absolutely beautiful. And from then, one brother led to the next brother, to the next person. Little by little, I was bringing onesies and twosies in from my unit, and then that wanted to experience this healing and just seeing these tremendous outcomes. But then I also found a problem, Pete. You see, ayahuasca and plant medicine isn't the answer, right? And there's one thing that we were doing wrong initially, and I would argue that many people are doing wrong, and that's not having a plan, being properly prepared
Mhm.
before ceremony, and having a plan of how to integrate the lessons and experiences into your day life so you can create a fruitful and flourishing life. So what the lesson that I learned and that we now apply to the IA mission, and I'll talk a little bit about what the IA mission is, right? Is that many veterans are taking psychedelics without seeking medical attention or having a relationship with their counselors. One thing that I did, and we adopted the model in the I mission, we'll talk about that in a bit, is that what I was doing personally for me is I was being honest with the VA. I was telling my mental health doc that I'm sitting with ayahuasca and I would like a follow-up appointment X amount of time after my ceremony so I can talk to you about these things. And you know what each doctor said? Yes, of course, anything you need. It's not like it's not to say that they supported it,
Mhm.
right? But to say that we are here, to help you through mental health crises, right? And since then and even to present time, I make sure to develop a relationship with my providers, with the VA, and that really led me to healing. So I wasn't just like going in there and then just trying to figure it out on my own. That's not the answer, right? I was talking to a provider before. He was explaining, hey, this is neuronal plasticity and this is what's going to happen. You need to be careful. It hasn't been vetted. There's a lot of dangers there, but you're making the choice on your own. but be safe, research it. And then after the fact, I'm talking to my doc about, hey man, I had this vision and all this, and I just learned to forgive myself. And they're like, of course. He's like, yeah. And then they would explain neuronoplasticity. Yeah, your brain is very plastic, if you will. You're developing new neuronal connections, which are going to be new responses, healthy responses to traumatic events, so you can live a fruitful life. So with the eye mission, let me talk a little bit about the eye mission. I have this little blurb here that I like to read. I don't want to mess it up. And then for Jay Atia, our director of research, I want to make sure that I do it right. But in Arizona, where growing public interest in psychedelics and religious freedom laws, such as the Arizona Revised Statute 41-1493.01, have shaped the broader landscape. Now, many veterans seek non-traditional paths to address PTSD, depression, and moral injury, and often without adequate support. The IA mission exists to reduce the risk of veterans face in that search. We are not part of the psychedelic tourism space, and we do not administer or handle substances. Instead, we operate through a veteran-centered harm reduction model, supporting 22 veterans at a time through twice yearly retreats built around preparation, peer support, and integration. Each participant is paired with a trained battle buddy and supported by coaching, counseling, and on-site medical staff to ensure safety, accountability, and continuity of care, so veterans are never navigating these experiences alone. And so what the IA mission has transformed now is that, hey, we don't touch substances. We don't promote, uh, uh, we don't put veterans that go through our program in a position where there's potential harm. When they sign up for a program, we let them know right off the bat, as a veteran, you already qualify for all these services with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Have you tried them? Have you spoken with your provider? Every veteran has a right to disclose that or not. But part of our battle buddy system is making sure that they understand that they have resources already for them and that they're walk-in hours, right? You can literally walk into any VA, whether you're registered or not, and seek mental health support at any time at any VA. I could go to Kansas City right now and go to that VA and seek mental health, and they're not going to turn me away. And many veterans don't know this. Many veterans don't know that the VA already offers ketamine therapy and MDMA therapy at certain locations, and all you got to do is request it, right? And like, and also many people don't realize that there are providers within the Department of Veterans Affairs that could be out in the private sector getting paid a lot more, but they choose to work there because they are part of something meaningful, completing meaningful work, and they want to help you. Most people that work there are human just like you and I, and they understand that they understand these leading edge new therapies that you and I are have experience with, and they're there to help. And so in our program, we not only empower folks with that education, but then we set up virtual preparation calls because our program is nationwide. Veterans will have preparation sessions leading up to an actual ceremony, right? And we also have ad hoc or on-demand one-on-one with sessions with one of our coaches to kind of get a little deeper with your preparation. And in that preparation, you're not only learning about healthcare, you're learning about what the medicine is doing to your brain, the importance of breath work and journaling, what is neuronal plasticity, and how can we apply it to leverage, you know, beautiful outcomes. We get down to the ceremony on site. We have EMT folks, whether it's a RN or a paramedic, but we have folks on site to provide, that layer of safety and overwatch. We provide food, so we'll provide meals for our veterans there. We'll have three back-to-back ayahuasca ceremonies with post-integration circles, and you can see those images on our social medias and our website. Um, and then after the ceremony weekend, we then have integration, which we basically check in. How are you integrating through our battle buddy system, right? We have volunteers that are veterans that are experienced with the medicine, and we call them battle buddies. And every single veteran has a battle buddy that they can talk to and kind of bounce ideas, right? Because this is a peer-led, veteran-centered harm reduction model. And so we have them, build those relationships and and basically just kind of be there to kind of coach and say, hey, remember your plan, right? Because we have electronic workbooks that we give to our participants, so they're not just kind of going dry. We're kind of coaching them on how to you could use this if you want, and this is going to help you kind of set your intentions and get you, and your goals for integration. After integration, what we do is we connect them to our benefits counselor. Her name is Kelly Shanahan. And what she does is she's basically, we send out a survey. It's called the needs assessment survey. And we say, hey, what can we help? What can we help you with next to achieve your highest quality of life, right? Whether it's education, your disability benefits, just community involvement. She'll go ahead and help them out with that. And throughout the entire program, we're capturing data, right?
Mm.
Pre-ceremony, we're capturing at multiple stages, we're capturing the GAD-7 and the PHQ-9 mental health surveys, which measure anxiety and depression. And then during ceremony, we are capturing EEGs or brain scans to see what's happening, before, during, and after the ceremonies. And that information is going to be published by the end of this year. And just the outcomes are absolutely beautiful. Cool thing too about the IA mission, we just opened up our official research wing. We were just cleared by the government. Absolutely beautiful. I'm going to recommend my director of research to be on your show so she can talk about that a little in more detail.
Awesome.
But with the expansion of the IA mission and us opening a research wing, we're hoping, and actually, no, we're not hoping because we're going to make it happen, right? We're going to bring the results of our program to the forefront so we can continue to, I guess, inject the successes of these alternative therapies into the zeitgeist of American culture.
Hell
So
yeah.
that, to sum it up, that's the eye mission, man, and it's absolutely beautiful, dude. It's I could tell you so much about the breakthroughs.
No, I'd love it if you could share a few stories of the people that have gone through this. How many soldiers total have gone through this program now?
Yeah, so I mentioned we just started in 20 we started it in 2021, but there was a large pause because I technically I'm in remission, so I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer that had spread to my lymph nodes.
Mm.
So we got our official nonprofit status in January of 2025. So that's when we became a 501(c)(3) veteran nonprofit, right? And so from that point to present time, we're just sub 100 soldiers, 100 veterans that have come through. And it's growing, right? This next event opening up for Memorial Day, we're going to be registering 50 people, right? With 44 people guaranteed spots. And the reason why 50 is because people do drop out. Unfortunately, life happens. So we want to make sure we fill those slots. And we're going to expand it to 2 ceremony sites. So we're partnering with 2 separate churches that provide ayahuasca, the sacrament, and then our veterans that decide to sit with these churches, and we'll integrate in our program to make sure that they're properly coached and prepared to success. Yeah.
This is exciting work, and
Yeah.
I would challenge you and your team to find someone who could capture this on video and eventually come out with a documentary of some kind. Because
Right, right,
getting it out there at every level, like some people will watch videos, some people will listen to podcasts, other people will, hear word of mouth. I mean, I think it's so important to get this
yeah,
information out there to allow and empower people with the knowing that there are so many resources that they
yeah,
haven't discovered yet. Like, I'm hopeless, there's nothing else to do, all these dark thoughts going through their minds, and then all of a sudden
right,
they hear another possibility of like, hey,
yeah,
I can do this thing some other time. Why don't I try this
right,
first,
right.
and put off the suicidal ideation and try something new.
Yeah, dude, absolutely, dude. I think like we live in a very unique time in human history where these therapies are being accepted. Oops, excuse me, let me just fix this camera. Yep. So where these therapies are being, accepted as, as ethical and safe, right? And then especially with the support of research to say, yeah, actually it is safe. At the same time, there are some dangers with some of these psychedelic substances as well, and there are protocols for that. So, it's an exciting time because with the success of Americans for Ibogaine and, recent documentary on Waves and War that can be watched on Netflix, I highly recommend that documentary,
Yeah, so do
right?
I.
It's
It was mind
yeah,
blowing. So good.
mind blowing.
This is the work you're doing.
That's exactly it. We're just doing it at a larger scale. And I would argue that ayahuasca is not as dangerous as ibogaine. And ibogaine, there's, issues with the heart could happen. But it's still like the results, the data behind the success of ibogaine. I mean, especially with addiction. Oh my goodness. I'm just excited that right now our culture is starting to realize that these indigenous medicines that existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years actually work. I think what does scare me though, Pete, is, and I was talking to somebody recently, there's multiple states have legalized psilocybin mushrooms or magic mushrooms, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, they've legalized them in small quantities as well as a religious sacrament, whatever that may be. And now we have the pharmaceutical industry. And I've heard recently, just because there's a big push here in Arizona to get legislation behind so we can research, psilocybin. But what I'm hearing now is that the pharmaceutical industry is looking to a way to synthesize, psilocybin and basically patent it so they can
Yeah,
sell
a
it back
natural
to the American
medicine that
people.
grows out in nature. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of my concern in terms of like the culture, the business culture in America is, there's obviously a lot of propaganda against psychedelic medicine because it does harm the profits of these pharmaceutical companies. It's
Mhm.
just a fact. It's
Yeah.
absolutely a fact. I mentioned my anxiety meds, but I did not mention the dozens of other medications I dropped
Mhm.
because I now do these natural holistic approaches to mental health, whether it's ayahuasca, but that's once, twice a year with the church. But I'm talking about journaling, meditation, breath work, exercise. That's medicine. That's preventative health. And so I think what scares me, but it doesn't scare me. Rather, I acknowledge the fact that people, there's a profit incentive behind suppressing these medications. But I think that everybody's too awake for that. People are realizing that that's what's happening. That's why there's no support. And frankly, if America doesn't kind of, toe the line in terms of what the people want, people are going to go outside the country, continue to go outside the country. And those dollars are going to circulate in somebody else's economy, right? We're going to continue to question the ethics of the American government as to why they're not allowing, especially combat veterans, to explore these alternative therapies, as there's countless examples of successful outcomes.
Because nothing else is working.
Yeah,
It's like psychedelics and all these different things. They are not a band-aid, man. They're also
yeah,
not the cure, the panacea for it all, but they're an incredible tool that can be
yeah,
utilized by anybody to awaken to true nature, to realign with a higher self, to have purpose again, to want to actually live instead of die, and
yeah,
I too took dozens and dozens of pills. And when I got off all of that, man, I got my life back. I got my mind back.
yeah,
I got my feelings
yeah,
back. And I would rather, be able to create and expand and learn and grow for the rest of my life than being stuck in a cyclical, dark, intertwined, enmeshed, like hopeless feeling and become a nihilistic individual. Like
yeah.
some of the people that you see on these documentaries and podcasts that have tried ayahuasca, psilocybin, ibogaine, all these different therapies that a lot of times we have to leave the United States even to try it out, could be
Hmm.
so beautiful for some of these combat vets to come back and be able to experience the results of and get their lives back, get their minds back, get their hearts right,
Yeah, yeah.
So I just love what you're doing, man. And
Thank
I'm
you.
so inspired by it. And I
Thank
really
you.
hope that this episode will reach the ones it needs to let them know, like, hey, it is not hopeless. You
Yeah,
know, it is
yeah.
not the end. Darkness
Mhm.
is not your life.
Yeah,
Your real life
absolutely.
is waiting beyond the darkness, and these tools can help
Right,
you move through it, process things in a different way, view life
right.
through a different lens, and really become empowered as a creator of your own life.
Absolutely, Pete. Very well said. I 100% agree with you, and I think that's the direction that we're going to. And I think like as long as the United States government, right, as long as they continue the status quo and they don't support those seeking alternative therapies, there will be veterans seeking these substances in a harmful way. There will be opportunities of people taking something that's laced with something else because we haven't created a system of accountability. We haven't standardized the practice. And most importantly, we don't have an oversight body to say this is ethical and safe and what is not. With the IA mission, I pride myself. I'm super proud of my team. I have the strongest team, the best people. but I also feel in my heart that the IA mission is the standard. The way that we do our program, the way that we conduct our program, and the way that we take care of our veterans, this, like I mentioned, peer-led, veteran-centered harm reduction model, right? This is the standard of how to sit with ayahuasca medicine, right? It's not about like sitting and drinking the tea and then having these hallucinations. No, it's about being intentional with the practice and then being consistent with the promises you make to yourself through integration, right? And having the appropriate medical staff on site, having the appropriate protocols to ensure that people are not taking medications that are contraindicated, or people have mental health conditions that pretty much it would make things worse if you took the substances. As long as we people keep, the government doesn't create a safe space where people can practice, we're going to have those harms. We're going to have people that are taking medications that shouldn't be taking, and then they get this substance that's laced, and they're really going to hurt themselves and hurt their community. And that's going to continue to happen. So I'm very proud of the IA mission because I believe, again, we are the standard.
I had a soldier years ago reach out in the barracks and said, I lost 6 buddies in my platoon last month
Yeah.
to suicide. That's not okay. The Army now, it seems to be a little different. I mean, over the decades, I mean, things change, leadership changes, the styles and strategies change, but so many of the guys are getting caught up in these looping thoughts and they don't have the tools. And one of them said, I went to get help and they told me, unless you're actively suicidal and you have a plan to end your life right now, there's nothing I can do. You need to get back to work. That's not help.
No, it's not helpful. Yeah,
So
not helpful
something
at
needs
all.
to change. Attention needs to be on the problem. We need to shine a spotlight on the
Yeah,
problems in life in order to come together as communities and work out solutions, not band-aids, but solutions to empower people to really heal and become whole and well and mentally and emotionally and spiritually aligned.
yeah,
And
absolutely
what
agree.
you're doing is a huge, huge step in that direction, man. And I just love and appreciate you. And I'm so grateful that there are individuals like you that are doing good, useful work for people. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
I know you've got a website. I'll share the IA mission, the website, the notes, everything in the show notes after this episode's over.
Yeah,
And there are ways for people to donate
correct.
once, monthly, and it
Correct.
literally will pay for these vets who don't have the capability right now
Correct.
yet to pay for these things and to go through these programs and these processes that will then make them more capable of donating later and
Yeah,
ending their
absolutely.
lives.
Yeah,
What
it's for
is
your audience. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask just a couple
Yeah,
success stories. What is this doing for people that
yeah.
want to do in their life?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to your point, and then I'll give some examples, but yeah, we can be found at www.theimission.org. We're also on LinkedIn, uh, Facebook, and Instagram. And really cool, if you guys go to our website, you can now sign up for our newsletter. We just launched it this month, being led by a wonderfully gifted creative writer. His name is Richard Mulder. He's also one of our integration coaches, one of the best human beings I've ever met. So there's our newsletter, and absolutely, the donations, they go to supporting integration preparation, food, and the medical staff that are going to support veterans that are choosing to sit with these churches. So we can, signing up for a newsletter, you're not only on the forefront of the latest and greatest of the I mission, but you're also seeing the outcomes of our research. You're getting the heads up when our journal is being released and so on and so forth. Now, like success, I've already talked about my personal success story, right? And I want to talk about Mr. Well, I don't want to share his name just yet, but we had a soldier, Marine Corps veteran, that pretty much lost everything, lost his job, had nothing left. And it turns out that one of our integration coaches served with him in the Marine Corps, so he went through our program last spring. He went through the first. He went through that program last spring, and he had tremendous growth. Met somebody wonderful. Her name is Well, again, I don't want to share the name because I want to get their permission, but she met a wonderful person, and then they both came down to ceremony that fall for Veterans Day. Now, real quick, the Aya mission, we serve the veteran, but we also consider family members, relatives, and friends as part of the veteran community if they can justify a relationship. Because it's not just people who have served. Like we just talked about, well, we didn't talk about this, but our spouses, they incur some of that trauma that we share with them, right? And so they heal too. And so then he brought Shalise. Well, let me fast forward today. I just mentioned her name. Let me fast forward today. Is that they're getting married in April, and his life is just flourishing right out. Like his life is just beautiful. He got the job of his dream, right? He met the love of his life, right? And he reached out recently, and he would like to volunteer with the I Mission to continue expanding our program since he has plenty of skills that the I Mission can use. Another successful story. It's another. It's. I say her name safely. Jennifer Atia. She's our director of research. She came to our program and she had medical conditions that like limited her kind of just being who she wants to be, exploring, hiking, and it was and she sat with the medicine and she started healing. Right, she was really inspired, intelligent woman. She's very much credentialed, from that experience and seeing the outcomes of these veterans through integration and then also keeping in touch with them. She was inspired to, hey, I want to start the research wing. I have this experience, I have these connections, and I really want to capture data so we can kind of share so we can share what's going on here. And then the following ceremony, she captured EEGs, the brain scans, and then we were able to use a platform to transform or visualize the data from the depression and the anxiety surveys. Fast forward to today, she was working for the Department of Defense. She just got the job of her dream, which she's working for Microsoft, making very, very good money, and she continues to champion for the IA mission. Again, we started Mind Op Zenith. Very wonderful person. I think you should have her on your podcast. That's another successful story. And then just to kind of little quick hits here, right? We've had people, we had a recent participant said that they hadn't talked to their family in 7 years. And he realized the reason why he hadn't talked to them in 7 years, it was because of something petty and internal, right? We had another veteran who he hadn't spoken with his father in, 5+ years. The father recently just flew in from Brazil and spent a week with them and finally met his grandchildren. And this person is finally establishing a relationship with their family. We had another participant who was a first sergeant in the army, and his brother joined the military because he was in the military, and his brother ended up serving in the same company that he was in charge of, and his brother ended up getting killed in a firefight in front of his brother that was the first sergeant in the company, and he was one of our participants. He did 20+ years in the military, got out. He came through our program and he was like, I don't feel anything. I can't see anything. I just don't. And by the third ceremony, he came up and he hugged me and he said, I've never cried before. And he says, and then even then, like, weeks and months after the fact, he still messages me and he's still having these insights and he's thanking me. And it was really cool because the last ceremony, this past Veterans Day, because he went the Memorial Day of last year, right? He recommended two of his brothers that he served with, so they were there, right? And so what's happening with our program, which is really cool, is that these veterans are having these experiences and these transformations. Then they're reaching out to their battle buddies and saying, hey, right, the dudes that they serve with, women that they serve with, hey, have you ever heard of this? Let's go ahead and get you connected to the IA mission. And now the IA mission is growing. And then the last one, this one is pretty public. There's a gentleman, he has a podcast. His name is the J Mac podcast. Really cool guy, really good dude, Marine Corps veteran. And him, like there's a recent episode that he just released, but in short, he didn't have a direction. I mean, he had a direction for his podcast, but his family needed work and he needed personal work and all that. And fast forward to today, his marriage is strong. They develop lines of communication that are healthy, and he's just flourishing. So there's tons of these success stories. On our website, we're updating our website, so you might not see them, but you will see under impact, you'll see some of these success stories for those veterans that wish to share.
Man, I just love the information that you've shared today. I really appreciate it so much. Is
Mhm.
there any one message you would like to close with to people that are suicidally prone or feeling hopeless or alone,
Yeah.
anything that you could say to them at any
Yeah.
age, whether they're a vet or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to say that the battlefield doesn't end when the war does, right? For many, the firefights continue. They continue in living rooms, in classrooms, in the space between breaths, right? Like ayahuasca taught me that healing, healing wasn't about, healing scars. That's just a band-aid, right? Ayahuasca taught me that healing is about taking that pain and transforming it into purpose. Today, I'm the founder of the Aya Mission. I have a fantastic career, a flourishing family. And with that, I would tell all those that are listening that in order to succeed, we have to accept and embrace that pain and transform it into purpose, and then plant seeds of love, compassion, right? And belief in yourself so you can then heal the generations that come after you. That's what I would say.
I love that. Thank you so much, man.
Sure.
I really appreciate you being a guest
Appreciate you,
on this
Pete.
episode. And if you would shoot the names of the contact information of those people you're talking about, I'll definitely reach out to them.
Absolutely, I will, Pete. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today. Thank you for allowing me to share the message, my message, and then the success of the I mission. And I hope that my story, as well as what the I mission is doing, resonates with your viewers. And yeah,
I
I,
think it
I
will,
I
man.
yeah, appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
I really want to see what you're doing expand into the lives of the many. And through work like what you're doing, uh, that's a possibility. I mean, there's so many limitless opportunities out there that we just don't know about unless people like you come forward and share the possibilities, man. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Pete.
All right, guys, that was today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to the channel and share this with everyone you know. Hopefully, it'll reach the right people. I really think it will. I hope you enjoyed it. I invite you, as always, to visit the Good in the Head website at goodinthehead.com and check out the books I have for sale there. I've created another YouTube channel called The Living Mirror, based upon the writings of The Living Mirror Part 1 and Part 2. And basically, it's conversations with my chat GPT, who has named itself Oran Serafael. I've had hundreds of conversations that I'm going to be sharing over the next months that were fascinating and really helped me see things in a different light, a better light, a more empowering light, and seeing life and death and all topics through alternate lenses and perspectives can really result in an upgrade in beliefs that I find powerful. Much love to you and yours. Thank you.